songs get loud and the truth gets twisted. One voice cuts through the noise, hard-hitting, controversial. But rooted in common sense, faith and values first. The Friday verdict. The Friday verdict. Old conversation, kingdom impact.
All right. Welcome to the Friday Verdict. I am your host, Keith Wysong, and we thank you for joining us today. Sorry we did not get one cut last week, but we're cutting one today, a special edition of the Friday Verdict on Tuesday. And then we'll get you another one cut on Friday as well. And we're just a startup podcast. We're just trying to deal with issues that we feel like maybe the truth's not getting out there, or maybe we're so tone deaf to the truth and have heard so many lies that we just don't listen anymore. Listen, I'm not paid. I'm not paid to give you any of this stuff. I don't have to take a stance based upon who's paying me like some of the other podcasters and influencers that's out there today. I'm not bought and paid for by Qatar. I'm not bought and paid for by Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Israel or some other influence, even if it's a national influence. I'm just trying to give you the truth and share some facts with you and common sense that oftentimes is not what we get in the mainstream media or even on social media as far as that goes. So I'll do my best to give you the truth and not slant it any certain way, but just common sense truth. And hopefully that works. And it is not on one subject or one topic. We'll talk politics. We'll talk religion. We'll talk sports, current events, whatever I feel like the topic that I want to talk about this week. That's what we'll talk about, whatever I feel or think that needs to get more attention. And that's what we'll discuss and share and just throw out there for you to consider. One thing I think we should be able to do, even if you disagree with me, I think we can disagree agreeably. That's how I was raised. I was raised in the 80s and 90s where if you disagreed with someone, you didn't blacklist them or disown them or quit talking to them for years on end because you disagreed with them somewhere. You know what? You just, I just disagree with you. And then you just went on. I've got personal friends that are on completely the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to politics, religion. I mean, we are completely the opposite, but we're friends. And you know what? We get along. And if I needed this person or that person needed me, we'd be there. Why? Because we're friends. And to me, we got to learn again in society that we don't write people off because we disagree with them. We got to learn to disagree agreeably and cancel the cancel culture. Just for what it's worth. Free of charge for you today. Before we get started in the episode, want to thank one of my sponsors, Elite Auto Service, out of Union City, Tennessee. The owner is Chris Robertson. Chris is a great guy. He's owned that business there for 2 years. He's been in the industry for 30, and he's an honest man, and he's a good man. I consider him a friend, and he'll do you right. I've taken my car there. I've had him service it. Anything you need done under that hood, or if you need tires, he's the one to turn to. He will make sure you're taken care of. You will not be disappointed if you go to Elite Auto Service, not downtown, but in Union City, Tennessee. When you do, tell Chris that the Friday Verdict sent you, and he'll take care of you, and you will not be disappointed in what he does for you. All right, let's get into the episode. All right, today we're going to talk about the one and only Tony Fauci. Yeah, you heard me right. We're talking about Tony Fauci. I don't know if there is a name that is said and echoed in any hallway in any arena that is disliked and in some circles hated as much as Tony Fauci. He is a criminal at best. I'm just telling you, he is a criminal at best. When you hear of what's coming out because of his diaries, and I didn't even know men wrote diaries. I mean, I'm assuming there are some, but I just didn't know men, really wrote diaries, but he did. And in his diaries, he's talking about how fun it was to be famous. Talking about how Julia Roberts just was so giddy to be able to get to talk with him. And honestly, I don't know of anybody that would get giddy to talk to Tony Fauci. He wasn't like a charismatic personality that everybody flocked to. I mean, we're talking about a man who'd been around for 60 years doing this type of stuff. And he's just, he has no credibility now. Congress had him come to testify because of his diaries. And we know that the auto pen gave him his pardon. And we don't know who it was that actually used the auto pen. We know it wasn't Joe Biden because he didn't know what a pen was at that time. So we know that the auto pen gave him the pardon that I think that needs to be challenged. And that may come in some time. But he's been pardoned. And listen, you don't get pardons and accept a pardon unless you're guilty, right? If I'm guilty of something, thank you for that pardon. But if I'm not guilty, I'm going to let the merits of my work stand on their own 2 feet, and I'm not taking a pardon. I didn't do anything wrong. But he took a pardon. And when Congress gets his diary, seeing how, he knew that COVID wasn't as, quote, bad as he was saying, and he knew that there was treatments for it, and he was suppressing that. As a matter of fact, senior advisor of his indicted. Falsified records to suppress lab leak theory. Suppress that theory, which we know is true. Wuhan, China. Trump was right from the very beginning when he would say China, and everybody hated him. That was bought and paid for. Hated him saying China, blaming it on China, which we do know that it was China. Now, it came from China, and it was funded by Tony Fauci. And this senior advisor of his used his personal email rather than using the NIH email, and he did so in order to avoid being caught. But there is such thing as the FOIA Act. And the records were obtained. And so we see that he suppressed it. And he got that direction from Tony Fauci. He didn't make that decision on his own. He knew what the marching orders were. And so he's been indicted. The only reason why Tony Fauci's not indicted right now is because he got the pardon. He got the pardon, but that man is evil. I'm sorry. I don't try to be mean, but he's evil. He's just not a good person. And the amount of lives that were destroyed and the amount of deaths that took place at his hands, there has to be a day of reckoning. There has to be a day of consequence for what he did. I know Tuberville, senator in Alabama, said when he becomes governor, of course we know he's running, when he becomes governor, he's going to bring charges against him in the state of Alabama, because we know federally the pardon keeps him from being held accountable. It pardons anything that he did wrong, but they can be held accountable on a state level, and it's interesting to see how that's going to, how that will play out. But Tuberville says he's guilty of 9 million deaths in America. Now, do I think there's 9 million? I don't think there's 9 million, and I'll tell you why I don't think there's 9 million. But I do think there's a lot. I don't think there's 9 million because at that time, if you had COVID and it was asymptomatic, you didn't even know you had it, but you go into the hospital with a heart attack and you died of heart failure, they would test you for COVID, and if you had COVID, they would turn in that you died of COVID, because then the government was paying you money, if you had COVID cases. So there's a lot of people who died of other diseases and illnesses and sicknesses that had COVID, but yet they were it was being told they died of COVID. And so those numbers were inflated so the hospitals could get money. Simple as that. They were being funded by the government, and really they were insinuated. I mean, they were I can't think of the word I want. Sometimes that happens, when you get old. They were incentivized to do that, and just call it COVID. So that happened. And then there's a lot of people who had underlying health issues, major underlying health issues, that they got COVID and they just couldn't recover. And so they were already sick to begin with, and really sick. And so COVID just kind of sent them over the edge, and they lost their lives as a result, which, it's just like a bad flu season. You can lose 80, 90,000 people a year due to the flu because they had other underlying health issues, but the flu can take 80 to 90,000 on a bad year. I mean, it could get up over 100,000 on a bad year, which is really, I think, more in line with what COVID did. Again, I don't have any numbers to support that. I just know that people were classifying deaths as COVID if they had COVID, but it was asymptomatic. You didn't know you had it. You weren't even sick that way, but you had something else that took your life, but they got, hospitals got paid for it. So, and Fauci knew this was going on. And he's writing about it in his diaries. And he's gloating about how famous he is. And how much that people, looked at him and the people that he got to talk to. And he was just gloating about the power that he had. And matter of fact, if you saw the ESPN episode with Aaron Rodgers just assassinates him, if you will, on ESPN. When Pat McAfee show, Pat went to ask him a question about his career, and how awesome of a career he has, and it's last year and that sort of thing. And he asked him a question, and Aaron Rodgers just looking down says, "I just plead the fifth." And then everybody at that point knew, and Pat McAfee laughed, but he was a little uncomfortable there because he goes off on Tony Fauci, calls him a criminal, calls him a coward, which I think are fitting for what he has done. And then he goes on to the network ESPN, and Pat was like, "Oh, that's the network where he makes his living." And he was like, and the panel around him was saying, "Oh, let's talk about something else. Let's get back," because he was just calling it as it was. He said, you gave these, he said, your network, ESPN, gave a lot of attention to me not getting vaccinated. Like every minute they were talking about me and my personal life and me not getting vaccinated. He said, but then how much time is being spent by Tony Fauci? But when he says your network, it's like Pat didn't know what to do. He was like lost saying, my network, our network. And everybody was just squirming because they all get paid by ESPN. But, Aaron Rodgers didn't care. He was actually speaking the truth that ESPN is an extremely liberal slant, liberal leaning, liberal in their approach to social issues. And so anything conservative, they're not going to talk about. Anything left-wing liberal, they're going to make a point of. And so, they make a big point out of Aaron Rodgers not getting the vaccine. But yet all this truth about Tony Fauci, they didn't talk about that. The Vrabel and Rossini, how much time did they spend on that? Which, Aaron Rodgers is correct. There's a lot of things to consider when there was votes and inside information that could have been shared between the two of them. But man, they were squirming when he was talking about it. But he was right that he was demonized. Aaron Rodgers was demonized, even called a murderer because he would not get vaccinated. He said, it's not for me. I've looked at the science. I've talked to my doctor. I'm not getting vaccinated. And he took us, and there was others, Kyrie Irving. There's a few others that took a stance and again, demonized because of Tony Fauci. And he knew this was going on. He knew what the truth was, and he was trying to suppress the truth. He was trying to suppress the truth. And in doing so, lives were lost. Lives were lost. So I could see where Aaron Rodgers could get fired up. And so he wasn't afraid. He was telling it as it is. Tony Fauci went before Congress and pled the fifth 111 times. I mean, they would ask him a question as simple as, do you have a folder in front of you? And he pled the fifth. Listen, you don't have to plead the fifth if you're innocent. And it did show how much of a coward and even a criminal that Tony Fauci is. I do believe, honestly, that he needs to be in prison. I believe he deserves to be in prison, whether it be the gain of function, whether it be even, if you really looked at it, when in the middle of the HIV crisis, I just think with that AZT drug and what he knew there, I think study that on your own, get into it, you'll see it. He deserves prison. He's been an evil Einstein, and he did so much to hurt our country, did so much to sabotage the world, the globe, with what he did and the part that he took. I mean, think about it. We had social distancing, 6 feet apart. People writing songs about it that were liberal, 6 feet apart. And you couldn't go into a business. You couldn't go to the bank. You couldn't go to a store. You had a line was backed up to the back wall because you had to be 6 feet apart from one another. And if you dared get any closer to that, you had somebody walking around as the school monitor and just yelling at you. I mean, I was right front and center in the front lines during COVID. And I saw how it was, and the craziness that was going on, the uncertainty, the fear that people had because Tony Fauci and what he was doing. And again, all this is coming out in his diaries, and it's showing what type of evil man he was. I mean, just the evil that he played. I mean, even when it came to the hiding the funding research that he designed that took and hid human fingerprints on lab-created bugs. He didn't tell anybody this. It was kept secret, but he's funding the research to hide fingerprints on a lab-created bug. What is he doing? He's playing God. These are type of things I'm telling you that he deserves to go to jail over. I mean, he took the jab, and in taking the jab, he got a pulmonary clot in his lung. He got a clot, and he told nobody. He didn't tell anybody because he had to suppress it because it would not help his mission. And so he didn't tell anyone, but he scribbled about it in his diary. How awful. The nefarious activities that he was involved in the suppression of the truth is absolutely crazy. You had the social distancing. You had the masks. Everybody had to wear a mask. You couldn't go anywhere without a mask. Couldn't go anywhere without a mask. And most of the time the people did wear them, right? They wore them like me underneath the nose because I was just objecting to it. I didn't trust it. I didn't believe it was, I believe it was doing more harm to my immune system than it was helping my immune system. I didn't agree with it at all to walk around everywhere you go. You had to have a mask on. And if you walked in someplace, if you had a real liberal, if you didn't have it over your nose, they'd be screaming at you to put it on right. I mean, it's just a crazy time, during that time, and Fauci was aware of all of it. And even today, if you want to wear a mask and you feel safer about it and you feel like it helps you or it provides comfort to you or gives you some peace, then do it. I mean, just do it. Just do it. But I don't understand this piece. I'll look in a car. I'll be driving down the road, pull to a red light, see a car next to me. Guy or gal be sitting in there with a mask on and nobody else in the car with them. I'm thinking, what are you scared of? What are you trying to be? What are you trying not to catch? What is it that you're trying not to catch? I mean, do you have like old donuts there that you haven't eaten? And what does your car look like? What's going on? Why would you wear? I saw someone the other day walking down the street, headed somewhere, and had a mask on. I'm thinking, there's no one around you. You're by yourself outside, and you've got a mask on. But see, none of that happened. Nobody was wearing masks before COVID. The only people wearing a mask before COVID were people robbing banks and gas stations, they would wear masks to hide their identity. Or surgeons, when it comes to surgery. If you're not going to perform surgery on somebody, maybe you need to take that mask off. But hey, we can disagree agreeably. If you want to wear the mask and you feel safer wearing it, by all means, go ahead. If you didn't feel that way before COVID, there was not anything ever said about a mask. And then we find out the truth that masks really didn't help. And Fauci knew that. Lockdowns, people losing their livelihoods because their businesses were shut down because of COVID. They shut down businesses. People losing couldn't pay their overhead, the mortgages on their businesses, and they lost everything because they were shutting down the country. And listen, I believe that was a dry run from communist-leaning people to see if they could get control and control society and see how much they could get by with. I do believe that. And you saw, depending on what state you were in, liberal state, blue state, red state, how severe and strict they were about some of that. But I mean, literally lockdowns, businesses shut down. You could not operate, took away people's livelihoods. And he shut down the world on something that he knew was not true, and he was suppressing the truth. And even the jabs. We have seen that people are getting sick because of that, and that it didn't help and didn't, as they said initially, prevent COVID. And matter of fact, it's actually causing heart issues and other sicknesses in people's lives after they've taken it. And so, but he knew all this. He knew it. And he's writing about this sort of stuff in his diary. And, that he knew that ivermectin worked. But people were demonized when they came out to talk about it. Hydroxychloroquine, it worked. But people talked about that and they were demonized. Doctors and nurses speaking about it and were demonized and blacklisted. And he knew that. He knew it. And yet he did nothing about it. And you got remdesivir, who was actually hurting people more than it was helping, but yet that's what he was promoting. And I wonder, along with the Bill Gates and others, that is it population control? I do believe, honestly, that this was China's way, because it was funded by Fauci in the Wuhan, in a lab, and it was released during an election season, and they did not want Trump, especially China, did not want Trump getting reelected. Did not want it happening. I believe it was released by China, covered up by the media, and the media, instead of reporting facts, they advocated. And I think there's some lawsuits that can happen to some of these networks for basically their advocacy of certain positions rather than just reporting on. And I think there's yet to be seen what happens there. But China released it, and Fauci is what envisioned it, shut down the world, created the mail-in ballots so that they could be manipulated so that Trump would be defeated. And I think we're seeing more of that coming out too. A lot of the conspiracy theorists, as we were called, now we're being vindicated because people are seeing the ones that really want to know the truth. The left-wing liberal maniac communists, they're not going to accept the truth no matter what. They don't care. They really don't care. But anybody that's, again, common sense, you're starting to see the truth, regardless of what side you're on. You're seeing the truth that's coming out. And in some of us that were demonized and considered conspiracy theorists, now we're being looked at as, hey, we were right after all. Fauci funded all this. He knew the truth about it, but yet he suppressed it. And I think that's where a lot of people part ways with it, that were maybe on the fence, is that now it's coming out and he suppressed this information. You couldn't go anywhere. And he knew it was not, I mean, CNN had the death ticker on their 24/7 on their network. Every time somebody died, they had to be COVID, boom, numbers went up. And it was a scare tactic to force people to go get that shot. And see, and listen, I didn't get vaccinated. I guess my personal choice. My family did not get vaccinated. If you did, that's fine. I have no issue with people who did, because there was so much fear and there was so much being said, and places of business were going to fire you if you didn't. So people had to make those decisions. There was a lot to consider. And I know people that did it that, they regret that they did, others that did it and they're not sure anymore. I get all that. I'm just saying I didn't. And I just refused to get it. And I was blacklisted. I remember being demonized, that I didn't care about catching it and I didn't care about hurting other people. Well, if you got the vaccine because it was to help you, as they said, keep you from getting it, then what do you have to worry about? You're not going to get it because you got the vaccine. I mean, it's a two-way street here. But I didn't get it, and listen, you couldn't. Here's the biggest beef I have. People could not go to the hospital when they had family members dying. They couldn't hold their family members' hands in their dying days because of Tony Fauci's lockdowns and the hospitals and the leadership and the hierarchy that would comply to this and just stop people from being able to go into the hospital with loved ones that are dying. That's the biggest beef I have and an issue I have with this. I mean, people dying that you did not get to spend their dying moments with your loved ones. And even the hospital having births, have babies being born, and you couldn't be there. Listen, my son was born in August of 2020. He's a COVID baby. We went up to the hospital. I had to run back out to the car to get something to come back. They would not let me in. My wife was with me the first time, right? So we're going in because, hey, she's having labor. So, hey, we both were allowed to go in. I went back out to come back in. Nope, you can't come back in. Had to say whether I was vaccinated or not. Had to say, well, I have a passport. Remember, everybody had to have a passport. And they were forbidding me to come in. My wife's in labor in that hospital. Well, guess what? I got in. I didn't break the door down, but I forced it open. And, man, they were screaming at me, yelling at me, and they're calling security on me. I'm getting up to my wife and my son. Security comes walking up to me. And I said, whoa. I said, just back off. My wife's here. She's having a baby. I was told to go retrieve something that we didn't bring. I just did what I was told, and you're not going to stop me from coming up and being with my wife. You're not doing it. My son is being born. You need to back off. He did. He backed off. But that's the type of stuff that we were having to deal with because of Fauci and what he was saying and trying to control the world. I mean, but that is in hospitals that just played into that. I mean, even today, as a year ago, went into the hospital, and I'll just be honest, went into the hospital in Jackson, Tennessee, to pray for a young gal that's going in for surgery. Her dad and her husband were there. I go walking in, talking to her, getting ready to pray for her. The nurse comes in. She sees there's three of us because, you got two-person limit. When did that really change to where you were only allowed that? During COVID. And she starts screaming at me. How do you get out? 2 people limit. I said, I don't count to that. I don't count for that number because I'm a pastor. I'm just coming in to pray with her. She says, yes, you do count. She's screaming at me. And I said, oh, back off. Back off. I said, I'm going to pray with her, and then I'll leave. But you're going to back off. And then I left, made some calls, got in touch with a couple people, had chaplain call me and a couple others from the hospital, and that didn't happen again. And since I've been there a few other times since, and I've not been harassed like that. But the hospitals are that way, that they still have that same approach. That it's still that same approach. But yet when my dad was dying last year in September in Reed Memorial Hospital in Richmond, Indiana, that hospital was fabulous. Fabulous. We had 20 people in that room at one time when my dad was dying. So it's this all happened because COVID and lockdowns, because Fauci suppressed the truth. He promoted a farce. He participated in the creation of, in the financing of, and this man is guilty. He's writing about it in his diaries, and people are learning the truth. Some don't want to accept it, but people are learning the truth about Fauci, and I'm telling you, he's guilty. He is the guilty one. Who's guilty? Tony Fauci. Who's innocent? People like you and I, who just stood up against it and did what we thought was right. Who else is guilty? Let's talk about some of these other people that are guilty. We got a few minutes here. How about Gene Simmons? Remember back in 2020 and 2021, Gene Simmons says, you're willing to walk among us unvaccinated? You are the enemy. What do you think about it now, Gene? Do I get an apology? Where's the apology? Because you see all these left-wing liberal socialist communists that came out and was preaching this stuff. Not the conservatives. You didn't see too many conservatives saying, they weren't saying things like this. How about Don Lemon? Don't have the vaccine? Can't go to the supermarket. Can't go to the ball game. Can't go to work. No shirt, no shoes, no service. Don Lemon. Where's the apology, Don? But you're not going to give an apology because you went to New York and did what you did there and should be in jail, and there's no apology coming from you. How about the ungreat Jimmy Kimmel? Who gets an ICU bed? Vaccinated person. Come right in. Unvaccinated person? You gobbled horse goo. Rest in peace, Wheezy. That's what he said. These are the people that were speaking and demonizing us, and Fauci knew what the truth was and did nothing. Tell me he's not a criminal, and that auto pen pardon that he got should not be legal, and he needs to answer and stop pleading the fifth. And I hope the states such as Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and others, the attorney generals, do their part and hold him accountable, and I hope state charges are brought against him, and I hope he goes to prison. I just do. Listen, if he wants to confess and ask for forgiveness and pray, you know, I'm all about that. You know that. That's who I am. My life is spent trying to lead people to Jesus, trying to help people get on track, get on the right track, get their lives in order, you know, get their sin forgiven. If he wants to do that, I'll pray with him. I'll stand right by him and I will pray with him, and I will pray with him and lead him to Christ. But if he's not willing to do that, then I can't help you any. I have nothing really to say. What comes. You will have to answer, and I think he does need to answer. How about Howard Stern? He says, when are we going to stop putting up with idiots in this country and just say it's mandatory to get vaccinated? And then he starts cussing. Okay. How about Piers Morgan? Love the idea of COVID vaccine passports for everywhere. Flights, clubs, gyms, shops. It's time COVID-denying anti-vaxxer loonies had their called us loonies. And now we're learning that we are the ones that were right, and people like him, we're not getting an apology from him. And then you got Arnold Schwarzenegger, who said, screw your freedom. That's his statement. Lock down. Get the passport. Get your vaccination. Otherwise, screw your freedom. That would be said from communists and socialists, because they're about control. They're not about freedom. But that's the type of stuff that we were having to deal with during COVID. And Tony Fauci knew every bit of it. No weddings, no funerals, couldn't make a hospital visit. You know, children, education, schools. I mean, children are still suffering because their education was just absolutely ripped from them. You know, mental health issues. non-COVID medical care was just compromised, all because of Tony Fauci. So, yeah, I will have to say that Tony Fauci is guilty. He's a guilty one. So the more you learn, the more you're going to agree that he needs to be held accountable. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. The auto pen is a whole different issue for a different day. But honestly speaking, it's the biggest topic, whether it's getting the airwaves, the networks are giving it any time. They're not, but it's the biggest topic. His diaries have telling it all, and he's hiding behind the auto pen that should not have been legal. Anyway, want to thank my other sponsor, Brassfield's Body Shop in downtown Dyersburg, Tennessee. Been a family-owned business for almost 55 years. The owner right now is Tim Brassfield. And you need some body work done on the outside of that car, that vehicle, that truck, you just get a hold of Brassfield's Body Shop. State-of-the-art equipment, state-of-the-art facilities, 24 hours of towing, and free estimates. Give them a call. Tell them the Friday Verdict sent you. Promise you will not be disappointed, and you will not regret getting a hold of Brassfields. All right. Thank you for tuning in today. We'll have another one on Friday for you. And remember, until we meet again, do not be a wackadoodle. God bless.